if you had access to the full user ID, password list, email accounts of the Syrian Electronic Army, what would you do with it? Just think about that, because I'm going to ask you again at the end. But this talk is about building an effective cyber intelligence program, mostly from the standpoint of not your typical IT intel that you collect, the probes, the scans, the potential indicators of hackers, but it's mostly from an open source intelligence perspective. I've been teaching this course for about 4 years at Utica College in a master's program, teaching cyber counterintelligence there, and it's really from a clandestine human perspective that I teach this course. So when I talk to this stuff today about intelligence, you can use it for both ways, but really what I'm focusing on is the open source side of the house. So what is cyber intelligence? Well, it could be global architectures, right? Our standard IT environment out there, threats and vulnerabilities. Oh, by the way, if you go to csrc.nist.gov today, where all the special publications are, you can't get to it because the government shut down. So we've asked everybody in the world to not hack us for the next few weeks until we get this solved. You know, it's just wonderful. Assessing risks, all the standard things we look at from an intelligence perspective on the cyber side, you build intelligence from. Actually, you grab data, you turn data into information, and then you turn the information into something that's actually actionable. And that can be all this stuff coming down to maybe just 2 or 3 recommendations or opportunities out there. You look at global events, because that can impact you as well. You look at maybe you're going to get hit by the anonymous. The latest Syrian Electronic Army hit was Global Post. They like hitting news organizations. Regardless, what we're looking at from what is cyber intelligence is a lot of different things out there, because you can find almost anything and everything on the internet that used to be SIGINT, imagery intelligence, anything at all, mostly, for the most part, you can find out there if you know how to look, and how to look out there with open source tools and methods. Regardless, open source intelligence itself is what is publicly available, whatever is free and available out there. Radio, television, news, journals, internet, you name it. Web 2.0, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Anybody, how many people here have a Facebook account? Keep your hands up. Who has over 500 friends on Facebook? 2. Who has over 600? 700? 8? Okay, you win. Sorry. Did you realize, let me ask this, do you know all those people? Absolutely not. You wonder how many are actually sock puppets mining your information. Maybe one of them is one of my sock puppets, who knows? They all have hot pictures. Yep, that figures. That figures. Drop a flash drive on the ground, let a guy pick it up, and what's going to occupy his time? Pornography. It only takes 60 seconds to infect your machine. So, if you're that much, so. But that's just an area where they're pulling up a lot of information, is off of these types of sites. Open source intelligence as well. Cyber espionage, there's something that's always bothered me, is people talk about the advanced persistent threat, which to me there's no such thing as that. It's always been cyber espionage. They just called it that to sell new product, which doesn't work, just like the old stuff didn't work. So anyway, it's unauthorized probing of the infrastructure. It's collecting of information out there. It includes intelligence and operations. And there's a lot of different foreign collection methods, indicators and countermeasures you can take a look at. Matter of fact, if anybody wants the document where this index is from, you'll have my email address at the end. Just drop me an email and I'll send it to you. It's a good little document that gives you the methods, indicators, and countermeasures for each one of these areas. And it's something to be aware of, because at conferences like this or bigger conferences like RSA, where every intelligence agency pretty much in the world are perusing things, it's good to know methods of how they come at you to extract information, either in person or over the internet. Now, getting into some definitions further on open source intelligence. It was found by General Zinni, a retired Marine general, that overall about 96% of the intelligence that he was able to gather and use came from open sources. And only 4% really came from top secret environment. The problem is we don't use it that much, although we are starting to use it, and that's why we hear so much about big data, because largely most of it is unstructured and very difficult to index and use. But more and more this data is significant in how we gather information about our adversaries. At the same time, it's how our adversaries gather information about us. It's how they penetrate our environments. So in order to build a program, you need to understand how our adversaries gather, but you also need to understand just basic information on open source data, which is part of open source intelligence. All these different areas. Can you imagine the amount of data? No wonder NSA is building a new data center in Utah. They ran out of space in Odenton. They have no more space to put their storage. Well, that's why they've got this huge data center. Unfortunately, some of it is ours. So, regardless, there's a lot of data out there that is just all over the place, and they're gathering it. Compression ratios, you got to shrink those down, hopefully, and make them better to utilize storage more, but the amount of information is just exploding, and the amount of information we post about ourselves is exploding. Maybe not so much in this room, but the younger crowd is just sees no reason not to post information about themselves. Open source data is just all over the place, and you get an idea of the comparison with open source as it compares to covert sources. Cheap versus expensive. The reliability is unknown, and that's a key area is trying to define reliability of sources. Many times you'll see data points all over the internet from different sources, but when you track it down to the original source, or you find it is just one original source. It didn't come from multiple different sources out there. So then you have to look at the reliability of that source, and there's some tools you can to look at that. Regardless, going back to traditional tradecraft of intelligence, there's a gentleman named Sherman Kent, Yale University, who basically set up these 9 axioms over building an intelligence program in traditional tradecraft. One is to focus on your leadership's concerns. Now, one of the problems there in leadership concerns relative to cybersecurity is the leadership that's going to drive that is probably the CISO, mostly because corporate leadership doesn't know or care. All they want is to just don't let us be hacked, right? And I don't want to see you anytime soon. And no one is really looking at it from a strategic perspective of what it can do to actually prevent things from happening or advance your program. Personal agendas. Lots of times in intelligence you can develop personal agendas based on bias that you have. And we all have bias, and that's something when I teach this course we get into cognitive biases and a lot of different things about confirmation bias, which is one of the worst types. Intellectual rigor, such as ACH, or analysis of competing hypotheses. When we look at all these metrics, and we look at the information that comes from a SIM and all these different log files that come in, we see trends and tendencies and possible different patterns. And do we actually analyze it further, or just take it at face value based on what we look at? Do we look at it for competing hypotheses of what it might mean? And do we use what's called disconfirmation of the evidence, which actually helps remove the bias? Not going to get into that too much today, but that actually goes into the analytic bias. Considering other judgments, something that's very hard for humans to do is to consider someone else's comments more of a devil's advocacy perspective. Use of outside experts can also be difficult because most of the time they want money, and that can be awful difficult, unless you can find one at a college or university who has a PhD and who is very interested in sharing what they know. You can sign them in, write them in with an NDA, and bring them in. Collective responsibility for judgments. That's something that Sherman Kent said was critical to the intelligence tradecraft. Is he'd put everybody in a room with possible different hypotheses on what the actual intelligence would be, and he'd make them come out with a unanimous decision. Bloodied and beaten an hour later, whatever, they had come out with at least one decision. They'd have to then collectively be responsible for that decision and then defend why they came to that decision based on the evidence and the disconfirmation thereof. And then communicate the policy of leadership support. And that doesn't mean you tailor your intelligence findings based on what they want. You actually address their questions and you answer it in an objective fashion. And of course, the other thing that's hard for humans to admit is our own mistakes. Anybody ever been in an argument with their spouse and it's a heated argument, and somewhere down the road in the argument you realize, oh my God, she's right, or he's right? Everybody ever been that way before? And how many people right then and stopped it and said, geez, you're right? How many did that? A few of you. How many didn't do it? Right? How many of you were lying? Right? Yeah, I've been in that, and it's, oh my God, I can't admit that now. But if I don't, I'm going to hear about it for the next 20 years every time we get an argument. So I've got to admit it somewhere. But that's really difficult to do. But these 9 axioms, Sherman Kent says, are really critical to intelligence and the tradecraft. So what is really the definition of intelligence? Well, traditional tradecraft says more of analysis is more on Pestelli, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legislative, and industrial type reviews, almost like the CIA World Factbook. It can be those types of areas there, patterns or anomalies in behavior, different bits of information that you can find. Some of the information that the gentleman before me spoke about was kind of some estimative type of intelligence and research intelligence out there as well. Now, the definition I think is more applicable to what we're doing here is the one on the bottom for intelligence analysts. And this is pretty tough. And ask yourself, how many of your people in your security organization actually truly analyze the information they have from the data they receive, which is probably mostly just all technical? Do they follow that type of structure? And they probably don't. They just look at it and deliver it based on what they see in a dashboard. And the dashboard is telling them, whether it's for a SIM or a log analyzer, that we have some sort of trend and there's some sort of anomaly in the traffic, or the traffic is dropping off. But they really don't analyze it in depth because they don't have the tools. They haven't been trained to analyze it other than just looking at the screen and interpreting what's on the screen. Sometimes, though, the tools do give you analysis, links, tendencies and trends, and some aren't too bad out there with respect to the SIMs if you know how to write the correlations. And that sometimes can take 1 to 2 years to actually build out a good security information event monitoring environment. So when it comes to issues around intelligence, you know, there's all kinds of new technologies out there for communicating and planning things on the internet. Net camouflage is actually critical. It's something that our adversaries do very well, is they hide their IPs, and they will fast flux their IPs. People know what fast flux is. It's actually seen a lot in botnets where the IP changes about every 5-10 minutes to a different IP, and it jumps around the world, making it very hard to attribute where it's coming from. Thing is, we can do the same thing if you're building your own cyber personas or sock puppets, and something you want to do if, in fact, you're going to build a cyber intelligence program that is going to look at your adversaries the same way they look at you. Some of the things I teach in this course is actually how to build cyber personas. How to build these sock puppets is what they're called. The technical term is sock puppets. And you have to make sure that you hide your IP very well. And you have, for every different sock puppet you have a different virtual machine, and the different virtual machine has different VPNs and different anonymizers. So the footprint is different for each one of your sock puppets. And that can be kind of a management nightmare if you don't have it well structured. Regardless, that is one of the issues we have with our adversaries, but then in turn we can use it against them to collect information. Open source data that is not really breaking any laws at all at this point. It may violate some of the Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter laws, but on the other hand, I don't really think of violating any Facebook rules as much of a violation at all, considering they're in my shorts looking at what I do all the time anyway. So, and that's just their business of what they're all about. Application of counterintelligence practices is really something that is coming around to acceptance. There's a site right now if you want to take a look at it, honeydocs.com. Honeydocs.com is a new site where you can download these files, and it has some phone home capabilities in these files. In addition, if you want to go to sourceforge.com and do a search on ADHD, there's a zip file where you can download these 5 or 6 different tool sets, an ADHD.zip file in SourceForge, and it runs on Ubuntu Linux, and you can build your own type of honeypot with phone home capabilities, also with some cyber warfare or counterintelligence type capabilities into this tool set. A little dicey for organizations to do that. You got to make a choice if that's what you want to go. In most cases, they don't. They'd probably rather hire a surrogate to do that type of work. But more and more, we're moving to that role. We're not sitting back and taking the shots anymore. We're actually starting to move in the other direction. things you need to consider if you're going to build a cyber intelligence program. Profiling of those who are coming after you, the actors and the threats. Not only just indicators and methods of what they're doing to your perimeter and what they're looking at, but also in the Web 2.0 world. And how much data is too much? Well, one of the things I try and teach when we get into open source intelligence is you can collect everything, or you can use certain tool sets and search capabilities to slim down what you're searching for and make it much more streamlined. If you search today, just go to Google and put in FOUO, for official use only. And if you just do that right now, if you've got your phones up or whatever, just go to Google and put in FOUO and search on it. In a few slides here, I'm going to show you a search, just a Google hack that'll strip down what you find and get to FOUO and what's out there published today that shouldn't be online. Just very simple methods that you can use to strip down the amount of information you collect. Time value of information and information superiority, these are things as when the information comes in either first or last. Some people put more value on that type of information, but it is an issue with folks, because sometimes we grab a hold of the first thing and we don't let go. It's like a dog getting into a bone and trying to pull it away from him. And do you eliminate an actor? And in cyber intelligence, you usually don't eliminate an actor. You usually continue to infiltrate and gather information on these actors. So, and of course, all the legal ramifications of doing these types of things need to be considered. But if you're not breaking U.S. law, the U.S. doesn't care. Because I've been doing this type of work since about 2004, 2005 timeframe. Mostly infiltrating cyber jihadist sites and al-Qaeda groups. And I've been pretty successful, although it's been getting difficult over the last few years, especially this year when Mr. Snowden leaked more information. They went silent for a while. But what that does is it creates a ripple. They change their behaviors and they'll come out a different way. So the first ripple is they shut down. The real important ripples are the secondary and tertiary ripples when they start to pop up again, where you start to collect information again. Overall, though, these are issues in open source intelligence that you really need to be aware of that can cause problems if you're going to build a program like this. So there's a lot of things you need to look at. Yes, we need a sophisticated capability to defend our environments, and more that sophistication needs to increase, because the typical tool sets of firewalls and IDS are not going to work. They're basically see, detect, and arrest type of things after the fact. And some of the things I believe we've built and we built out is we become cyber janitors. All we are is a cleanup crew after we've been hacked. In my view, we need to start preventing these things. Not only prevent them, but eventually try to predict them, and that means intelligence collection. I think it's a critical factor, something we need to build and invest in. It's still early in its time, but more of the classes I teach are for financial institutions who are usually ahead of the game anyway in building out their programs because of the strict regulations around those organizations. Current weaknesses, of course, we need to do that. Defense capabilities lagging, absolutely, just mentioned that. Intelligence capabilities still evolving. They are definitely still evolving, and more people are out there doing it. I mean, CrowdStrike has taken on $56 million, which means the cost to you to buy their products is going to be significantly high if you're going to go with those folks. On the other hand, a lot of the same things I teach, you can build your own program and not have to spend $56 million. I'm just going to charge you for training and try and teach you to fish instead of stocking the pond for you. So it's a little bit different type of approach that I think is effective. So the role of cyber intelligence, well, there's military operations. We just heard quite a bit of that from the previous talk. There's government type of activities, critical infrastructures we need to focus on out there as trusted connections. Most of what we're going to look at, or what is probably, most of your probably private sector, is your business interests, your critical information, your intellectual property, your PII, PHI, partnerships out there that you may have with government or other organizations that maybe you share data with, much like InfraGard. Although the InfraGard data is good, but usually by the time we get it, it's kind of watered down, right? It's been stepped on a few times, and it's probably by that time open source. We need to get the FBI to give us a little bit more, right? Give us a little more data, and a little more data in a faster time frame. Now, there's some other areas. The tenets of intelligence are these 5 here: timeliness, accuracy, usability, completeness, and relevance. These are things that you put on the wall in your cube, so you're always keeping in mind when you're giving a task by leadership to go forward, I got to get this intelligence based on the time frame given, if not before. It's got to be completely accurate as much as possible, even though I will never have enough time to collect all the data I need, and the data I do collect will not be complete, although I've got to make it as complete as possible. It's just how it works. Usability, it's got to be tailored to the needs of the leadership out there and suitable for their comprehension, meaning it's got to be in their terms. So when you write up the document, you do it with the BLUF, or the bottom line up front, the BLUF. And there's methods to write this way, all in active voice, never passive voice, very structured, short sentences, no $10 words, no more than 12 to 20 words per sentence is the method you go through this. Very clean, clear, crisp, because all they're really going to look at is the first paragraph, much like the elevator pitch. It's all they have time to look at, and they're going to trust that you've done your job to make sure that it is accurate and complete. And then the completeness as mentioned, and then the relevancy. You know, how relevant it is to what your business does and protecting your intellectual property, and how far do you want to go with it. These tenets of intelligence you keep in mind all the time, and you can keep this in mind for pretty much anything you do in business, but they're key to cyber intelligence as well. And analysis can be much like a production line, and not everybody's good at writing, so you don't want everybody out there writing, all your engineers writing. I use Myers-Briggs testing when I have students come into the class, and usually all I want to know is their first name and their Myers-Briggs. And based on that, I organize them based on the cyber intelligence life cycle. Because if I find an INTJ and INTP, those are the two most likely to be hacker types, then I'll put them mostly in collection, because that's usually where they're better at. I also look at ISTJ types that are really good at organization and structure, and they need order, so I want them in the production process. So I try and organize people based on their Myers-Briggs. And it may be soft, but it's worked pretty well. Although you may not have an organization large enough to build it that way. You may have people doing many things. But if you have the luxury of having enough people, there's free online Myers-Briggs tests, and I think I found it to be very effective in building an organization based on the cyber intelligence lifecycle. Regardless, you go through reviewing, editing, publishing before it goes forward to make sure that you are writing to the BLUF, the bottom line up front, and in that format. And you interpret it properly. You maintain objectivity and stay away from bias. And you deliver it. It can be like a production line if you structure it that way and into this intellectual rigor. Again, one of the axioms from Sherman Kent. The cognitive bias and cognition is critical to analysis. Again, I ask you if any of your folks who do metrics and analysis in your security groups actually look at it this way. They probably don't. It's a level of maturity in building the program out and just having awareness of traditional intelligence tradecraft. As that now bleeds into cybersecurity, intelligence is becoming absolutely critical to interpret and deliver. So the intelligence life cycle, as you see on the screen here, really starts with information coming from your leadership. Policy information gets fed in, and you start planning and building your targets out. Your requirements, your priority intelligence requirements come through. You go through collection. In this case, it's open source intelligence on the internet, which can be human, it can be imagery, it can actually be signals as well. All types of information that you gather. And when I talk about human intelligence, again, the cyber persona perspective of building your sock puppets, your fake IDs, and managing them online, it's amazing what you collect out there and how you can friend people. At the same time, I had someone try and friend me this week, a hot picture from, yeah. And I always take a look at them and say, well, do I want this sock puppet to be in? Because lots of times I want them in to see what they're doing. Or do I just want to ignore this one? And I'll let them sit for a while to make the determination. But for the most part, I have Facebook accounts out there that look like me, but they're not me. The one that's me, you won't find. It's pretty well locked up. But in teaching the classes, a lot of students have created Facebook accounts on me, and I let them go. And they're completely false. I've been arrested for hacking. I've got all kinds of things out there, and it's been great in having that because all my information's online anyway, but now it's so diluted, no one knows really what I have done or what my background really is. because the students have created all this new stuff. LinkedIn accounts, new resumes built. It's great. It's great, as long as my wife doesn't go looking for it. I've left it stay out there, and I just came back from teaching a cyber intelligence course actually in Kuala Lumpur, and this is an organization there that is looking at more their own country at this point, because they really don't have any natural enemies at this point, although they're kind of wary of Singapore and Indonesia and the Chinese, but they had a hard time discerning which one was me, or even if my name was Jeff Bardin at the time. So it makes for a good deception and denial, which is part of collection as well as counterintelligence. Regardless, in your life cycle here, this can continue to, it's an iterative approach. After your collection, you go to production and organization. From that, you go to analysis. And from analysis, you go to dissemination. And you want to make sure that someone who's disseminating this information actually disseminates it in such a way that's effective and clean and clear to the leadership out there. So very standard cycle here that actually, one life cycle, the information can actually lead to jump off from another life cycle. So you go through the planning process. In the intelligence life cycle, you look at the issues that need to be addressed that come down from leadership. What information is going to be gathered based on what the priority intelligence requirements are. And you can actually take off again from the previous cycle that can feed into the new one. And it fuels another, as I mentioned. Again, hopefully it comes from guidance from leadership. Sometimes you need to jumpstart this by showing them the capabilities of what you have. One of the things I always urge people is when they start to create their own open source intelligence capabilities and their cyber intelligence focus is to target themselves first. Because you don't want to live in a glass house, and you want to know what your adversaries know about you. You want to know your Web 2.0 attack surface as much as possible, because that's what they're gathering knowledge-based information on you from. And it's a least path of resistance into your organization. So all this information that's out there can help guide your strategies out there in your planning. Like anything in any project or program, planning is critical up front. There's no doubt about it. It has to be done. Collection and gathering can be the fun side of the house as long as you can maintain anonymity out there. It can be open, completely open, or it can be open source through covert means, through sock puppets and different methods. It's amazing how much you can gather out there from being in these environments. I've had sock puppets in Al-Qaeda forums for a number of years, and I had this one very senior sock puppet in this one forum, and the forum was kind of stale, not much was going on. And at the time, bin Laden had just come out and said how the West was the reason we were having all these problems with global warming. And so I had a junior sock puppet in that same forum. And what I did is I took the junior sock puppet and started bad-mouthing bin Laden, saying, how can the Emir be reduced to talking about environmental issues? We should be attacking the West. And so with my senior sock puppet, I called out the junior one. We got him kicked off the site. I got more street creds and got access to another level of the site. So there's things you can do in your collection phase by using your sock puppets to actually get deeper into these environments. And yes, I provided this information to the FBI on and off. No disrespect to the FBI, but it was no quid pro quo. It was always information in and nothing out, coming back out. And so after a while, I stopped because they were treating me as a confidential informant. That's not really a real comfortable place to be in as a CI. When they come to visit your house and you live 70 miles from Boston out in the sticks and they spend 4 hours debriefing you, won't tell you why. So it kind of makes you a little nervous as well. So I stopped giving them information, but once in a while I find data that is of significance. I will send it in to some three-letter organization somewhere to make sure they have it. So keep in mind the Syrian Electronic Army question, if you had to use their IDs, passwords, and emails, what you would do with it as we go through this. So we collect all this information, we feed logs, we correlate data, we can create honeypots, honey nets, honey docks out there. There's all kinds of stuff we can create if we want to find out where they're coming from, because if there's attribution of where they're coming from, we can do something with our technologies. We can do something out there to block these folks. But again, I mentioned before about sources and reliability. This is a little tool set that starts from the bottom moving up and starts from very unreliable at the bottom to very reliable at the top from source reliability and information validity and these rating scales. And what you really want to get to is hopefully the top two, where you've really got someone who's completely reliable, the sources are, and they're highly confirmed. That takes time to get that. It takes time to build that understanding, to have that type of information, unless it's someone who is online like Brian Krebs, who for the most part is very reliable, checks his sources, good stuff out there. But he doesn't let everything out. He lets certain things out, and his role as a journalist is to let things out. In the cyber intelligence arena, I don't publish many things out because we still want to infiltrate and get in, so I'll publish certain things out. You're familiar with the Inspire magazines that Al-Awlaki had written? They're these English language magazines. Well, I finally went and cracked Inspire number 11, and I rewrote it kind of tongue-in-cheek. So if you're interested in that one, I'll send it to you. I thought it was kind of funny, but I don't think they enjoyed it too much. But what you can do is they've got so many PDFs out there from an information warfare perspective. You can actually go in, hack their PDFs, rewrite them from the standpoint where it's just softly changing and making it more of that their whole effort is really in desperation, and then republish it back on their sites. You've got the analysis stage, the most difficult stage of all, that you've got to evaluate all this information, look at competing hypotheses, make sense of it, make sure the reliability and credibility is there, the relevancy is there, keeping in mind your 5 tenets, as well as your 9 axioms from Sherman Kent along the way. And you've got to really have sometimes subject matter expertise and specialists, maybe of a Middle Eastern type, Soviet Russian, or Chinese, to make sure that you really can focus on the information and understand it, and then develop further requirements from it. The analysis stage actually includes 14 different areas, cognitive areas of elements, from decomposition and critical thinking and different types of analysis, down to recomposition, and then actually synthesis, where you're developing the recommendations and opportunities in your bluff, your bottom line up front. Very difficult to do, but something that must be done. Lots of finished intelligence out there. If you want to take this little command right here, this is a Google command, you want to find the FOUO now, you can type that down, site:/space.mil, space pipe, space.gov, double quotes FOUO, space file type :PDF. That's just a typical Google hack, but try that next to just a standard Google search of FOUO, and then try this one. And it's amazing how that'll cut through the chaff and get you what you want very quickly. There's plenty of sites out there that go through these Google hacks, and it's just learning how to use the search engines properly with the capabilities available. If you want to try that one, you can put, again, it's variable with a file type, variable with the domain type, and site is just one of the many different commands out there that Google affords if you know how to search on them. There's dissemination of the information, yes, and then the type of information here that the quality of the information when you write it in your analysis. There's a little checklist here. And of course, you want to be in that first column above standard. Who you're going to deliver it to needs to be covered. And knowing your audience is critical, and who they are, and building what's their knowledge, what's their attitude, and what's their needs. Basically, know your professor, get an A, right? If you know your professor, you'll get an A. If you don't know them, then you're going to deliver the wrong type of data to the wrong person. They're not going to accept it, and they're going to think your effort is poor. So you need to know who you're delivering to. 5 categories of finished intelligence. Current intelligence, which is what we see a lot day-to-day type of activities, which a lot of Americans are comfortable with. Estimative intelligence, or looking down the road and estimating what might happen based on the information you've got. Warning intelligence, we know what that is. Hey, something's going to happen. Best be prepared for what's coming next. Then there's also research intelligence, which includes several different areas. Sometimes you need to do a lot of research intelligence to build your foundation of your program. And then there's scientific and technical intelligence. Regardless, all this goes back in through the life cycle from top left to right, from policymaker to decision to direction, data requirements to collection, planning, assignment, open source in your collection, potentially relevant data, and so on in your intelligence life cycle. There also can be data cleansing, because basically our cyber hackers, cyber and criminals out there, and foreign intelligence organizations are looking at us at all these different areas. This is where they're collecting information on us. They're building it. Knowledge-based, how many people here, when you go into a bank, you put in your user ID, your password, a PIN, you reset your password, it's what street you grew up on, your mother's maiden name, all this stuff, right? All the stuff we can get off of Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube if you're posting the information out there, all knowledge-based. We move away from two-factor authentication to multi-factor, now to knowledge-based, and it doesn't work because we post all this stuff online. It can be gotten. You can get into Ancestry.com, put your credit card in for a free 2-week trial, and you can get your birth certificates, your marriage certificates with signatures, all kinds of information. It's all there. If you haven't done it, try it. And you can shut down your credit card before the 2 weeks are up. It's a great area to go in and mine information about someone in the US. Perfectly legal, although I think they should be fined for putting the information out there. But it's just crazy what's out there on Ancestry.com, and they do the same thing to find out information about people. And that information is used to hack their accounts, to get into their accounts out there. So my view is you build your own cyber personas, your own information, your own intelligence environments, and target yourself as they would target you. One way to do that is take a look at your organization across LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all blogs. And there's a multitude of other Web 2.0 sites out there. And look at the number of sites that your organization has. And then the content with each one of those sites. Because lots of times your organization may have multiple different sites within these sites that you don't even know about that people have established. Who are the organization users, and who are the followers or subscribers to those, the friends, whoever they are, and what are they saying, what's going on? Are you posting job information with technical information on a LinkedIn site, for example? The data out there that you can collect is amazing. The dossiers you can build, significant. The information being used against us is just incredible that you find off of these sites. So I say lots of times too, some of the things you could do is perform online operational security. Go and cleanse this information, organize it, designate members to go out there and clean it up and moderate posts. Possibly buy some software for that, because there's software that can moderate your Web 2.0 sites en masse and actually track it. Establish rules out there, monitor the presence. Keep it in your program. When you build your cyber personas, sometimes too, to see the value of it, target leadership in your organization. It's amazing what you can find about these folks out there, from their golf homes and homes on ski slopes to their political contributions. It's amazing what you can find on the internet about leadership. And when you present it to them, they get a little bit nervous. And maybe they'll fund your environment once they find out what you can find out about them. Maybe there's some things you don't want to present to them that you have found out as well. Use judgment if you're going to do that, because you may find yourself on the street. If you're that good, I may hire you. So anyway, rolling this down. My whole point here is to build a cyber intelligence organization, you really need to understand traditional tradecraft and understand how to analyze the data properly. Today we use technologies. Today we use tools and sims to present information, and we get charts and graphs and we look at trends, but it's really in a see, detect, and arrest type of environment. I think where we need to move is into the open source arena and start to combine that information with what we find in the technical world to get a true picture of our overall attack surface and be able to do something about it. I'm not advocating you go out and attack someone else, but it doesn't hurt to infiltrate and find out what they're doing in the Web 2.0 sites either. So I ask you again, what would you do if you had all that information on the Syrian Electronic Army? Anybody want to answer that at this point? Would you do anything with it if you had all that information? Because they're using it to phish different sites, right? So we've hacked the Syrian Electronic Army. There's 4,000 records here, all their user IDs, passwords, email addresses, get in their email accounts, downloaded their emails, all their contacts. That's what cyber infiltration does. You get this information. It's great what you can do with this. And yes, it's been provided out to 3-letter agencies. But this information is invaluable. These guys are still hacking folks left and right. But you get inside, you find out who's driving them, where they're coming from, their tendencies. It's amazing what data is out there with these folks. And I can't see it on my screen here, but there are multiple different links here to take a look at. What I wanted to get to was further down through. Sorry, I just can't see it, but the amount of data here is amazing. And I have about 2.6 gigs worth of just a couple of email accounts of all their emails and information. So it pays off. I have violated no US laws. I may have violated Syrian laws, but I really don't care when they're hacking us. So in the meantime, cyber intelligence can provide a lot of value. You block these emails from trying to phish you, because they're using Hotmail, they're using Yahoo, you get their domain information, you get into their email accounts, you start emailing from their accounts because they haven't changed their passwords. Sometimes use the same passwords in Facebook as they do as YouTube. They're very poor in their own security. They make the same mistakes we do. In building your cyber intelligence program, this is just to show you some of the results that can be done. And it can be done very easily in getting into these environments. So with that said, consider a cyber intelligence program, but follow intellectual rigor in your process, understand traditional tradecraft, and go about it in a methodical way to use what you have and understand the capabilities of your existing staff. With that said, you can't have that file. So not that one. You can have other ones, but not that one. And that's, I guess that's all I have to say about that, right? In the words of Forrest Gump. Thank you.